That's what I used to do. That was my baby gift to Annie every time she had a baby. Is I would write all her thank you. Oh, yeah, that's a good. Yeah, every time. Yeah, we're ready for you.
What? It's the same crowd.
No, because we've been two.
It's the same crowd. You must have felt the congregationalists. I told you our minister is the call us.
Yeah, it's really cost.
Why would he call you that? Because it was. It was not a crap, it was especially wrong. Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. It is 3:32 p.m. and I call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council to order. Our first order of business is a closed session to deal with a discussion of collective bargaining matters. Can I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
And a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. We are now in closed session. briefing?
So we're all good.
Oh, okay, good. That's the most articulate I've been in weeks. Um, so, our first item today, before we get to the public hearing, is a continued conversation, about the 2025 budget. Today, we're going to address the remainder of revenue, and the capital tax portion of the budget. Amy, is that you? Do you want to stand or would you like to sit up here?
I can stand.
No.
I think I said no, thank you, but
But she meant no.
there's enough room over here.
That's great.
So we do want to get through the rest of the revenue pages. And so we'll start on page 3 of the budget, which is licenses, permits, and fees. And if you're following along in the narrative, we're starting on page 4. As we talked about last time we met, there's not a lot of material changes in other revenues besides taxes, but it's still important to talk about them and where there is room for growth and where there is not, and where we've maxed out and what some of the changes are. So in licenses, permits, and fees, you have the first section there, clerk's office fees, and most of these, at this point, the town has reached the statutory caps on what those fees are. The one that has some variability to it, or the two, are recording fees and other clerks' licenses and fees. Those are particularly sensitive to real estate transactions. So we did see a bump for several years. We're sort of settling back into a new stasis on those two. Is that fair to say? Great. And so there really was an opportunity in fiscal year 25 to project any changes on that revenue. Moving down to building inspections and land use, we did talk about building permit revenue last time we met. We did increase the projected budget for 25 by $25,000. That's up to $250,000. We are at the 250 level at this point in the year for fiscal year 24. You know, you could make an argument that we should project even higher for 25. That's always a risky game. We could push a bit if we needed to, but this is sort of a more conservative approach. It's obviously higher than the 3-year average that we've been seeing, but like I said, 250 is where we are at. Year to date for 24, it is the budget amount for 24, and we're increasing by 25,000 up to 275 for next year. In the next group of fees, planning board, historic district, zoning board fees, the land use officer did propose last year some changes to a number of those fees. And we did budget based on that. In reviewing the budget for this year, it became clear that those fees were not actually adopted by the council. So they're going to be coming before you for action and implementation this year. The good news is most of the ones that she had recommended changing, we didn't actually see any of those applied during the year for the most part. So it's not as though we missed out on revenue, but she did want to make an effort to recover some of the charges and costs that are associated with those larger planning and zoning applications that they're seeing. So you'll see that in the next month or two, I would expect.
Okay.
There's also an opportunity there just to review some of the things where the town may be waiving fees or not charging fees, things like the 513 application, things like that, to make sure that's all consistent with what our priorities are.
Gotcha.
And then the last line there, short-term rental license, is obviously a topic that's being considered by the town now. We have not implemented a revenue line for that license yet. If the ordinance were to pass, obviously that may be a component of it. We also haven't implemented any of the associated expenditures with that ordinance. So if that comes to pass, it's something we'd have to introduce.
But that is something that if it were to pass and the fee were to be implemented, that we could deal with after a financial town meeting. So for example, a financial town meeting, if the vote to pass the short-term rental ordinance passes, it has a fee associated with it, and the presumption or the plan to hire someone as the clerk and or enforcement, we have the power to do that.
It
Tell me,
gets
I'm,
It gets a little tricky.
okay,
So in a perfect world, or at least as close to perfect starting today, is we would have a vote of the council prior to adoption of the budget.
okay,
If we don't have it prior to adoption of the budget by the town council, we would hopefully then have it prior to financial town meeting, which again gives us a chance to amend the budget in real time at that meeting with some of the expected revenue, but more importantly, associated planned expenditures. A little bit about the program,
sure,
because by statute and by our ordinances, that adopted budget
right,
lays out the only expenditures that are permissible during the year.
gotcha.
So it
That's very
does,
helpful.
it does get pretty sticky if we don't have that vision prior to
Yeah,
financial town meeting to then hire positions and spend a fairly material amount of money without that having to go through the.
Millie, what are the dates?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's right after the 7th, the 6th, and the financial meeting, the public hearing is scheduled for the 7th.
Right,
There we
we'll
go.
have to figure that
Can
out.
we change that? So when you schedule something to a date certain, wish you had been at that meeting, Amy. Um, So if there's no flexibility in that, what's the process?
Do you want to handle that, Marianne, or you want me to?
No.
Okay. I'll come over here. So there is an opportunity. I don't want to undermine the council's process at all in evaluating that ordinance, but if there was a strong feeling in one way or another that it was likely that we were going to implement this for the upcoming fiscal year, then we may want to consider including that in the budget, both as a revenue and expense element as we go through this process over the next few weeks. And then if the ordinance doesn't pass.
It didn't
remove it.
happen, right? That's right. That was something I didn't think of the,
And just FYI, I did speak with Lynn and I got confirmation today that my recusal review for the other would be really good.
terrific.
But if we put numbers on both revenue and expenditure, we put the same number in, it's not gonna.
We wouldn't spend it if we didn't pass the ordinance. Yes.
Gotcha. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but thank you. Any other questions on these revenue items? I don't.
We want to turn to then pages 4 and 5 of the budget. This is other town fees and income. And again, there were not a lot of material changes in most of these line items. Harbors had significant fee increases last year, so we're already reflecting those in the current 24 budget. Recreation, we did make some changes to the line items. And this was really a strategic decision. Prior to this year, we had been calculating budgeted revenues based on program capacity. And then most years being under budget on our revenues. And so this year we've based recreation revenues based on average or typical program enrollment, which brings down those revenue estimates. It's really a more appropriate way and is matching our revenues and expenditures in a better way. But it does take that first year haircut off of those revenues. And then the final item that I would call your attention to is second from the bottom, the state road agreement. We are in conversations with the state about amending that agreement and renewing it going forward. It does expire its next 10-year cycle in 2024.
Yeah, just so the council, I think you're well aware, that agreement expires on July 1st, 25. I've been in contact with RIDOT. I sent them my proposal for the agreement, and I'm just waiting to hear back. And then it does include, as Amy says, an escalator of costs to RIDOT. It's a 10-year, requesting the same thing, another 10-year agreement.
Which agreement is that?
This is RIDOT, Rhode Island Department of Transportation. They compensate the town because we maintain the state roads. So back in 2004 was the first time the agreement was adopted.
Sorry, I couldn't hear these and I couldn't follow.
You know?
Go ahead, yeah.
So, you and I traded a text on the landing fee.
Sure.
So could you just, they probably all know it, the landing fees are by statute
Mhm.
and changeable, how does it work? I know you said the money goes into a fund, the state then gives us.
Not the state.
Oh,
So it
no.
is governed by state statute and the fees that are collected are set in that statute. That statute also requires that landing fees are collected into a separate fund by the town. So the commercial ferry companies, the private marinas, and are collected into a distinct fund of the town of New Shoreham. We then transfer by council action from that fund into the general fund on an annual basis in order to support those activities outlined in the ordinance. So things like public restrooms, dispatch, medical center support, things that are related to the people who land under those landing fees. Because of that transfer and the time lag and the budgeting, what we budget for in fiscal year 25 are the fees that were collected during calendar 23. And so sometimes people look at those landing fees and are using them to determine trends. And it's important to understand the time lag. So fiscal year 25 for us represents calendar 23.
And maybe someone for the council, the
Well-
landing fee establishment of that statute. That was something the town obviously asked for, got after some finagling, but is that able to be changed and, No.
It's a living statute, so yes. If I recall correctly, and please, if someone else remembers differently, correct me. But Interstate Navigation has taken the position that they are voluntarily collecting and remitting. Notwithstanding the fact that there's, in my opinion, a statutory obligation to do so. And we actually pay Interstate Navigation to be our collector and remitter.
Yeah, but I can never remember. How much is that? I always get it wrong.
It's like 15 or 20%, if I recall correctly.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure we can get that.
That
to
just
you.
seems like an important number because, I
Yes.
mean, we don't really think that only 384,992 people came here. So
Well, this is.
obviously, we're not getting 50 cents remitted
We're
per
not getting
person.
50 cents anyway, we're getting,
We're getting 80% of that. I think it's 20 if I recall from the contract, but
I'm pulling up, hopefully, I have this agreement on top now.
That line item also represents entities beyond interstate navigation, which is important to remember.
would you say that again?
That
Sorry.
that line item also represents entities beyond interstate navigation. So you have Interstate Nav from New London, who again, I want to be careful about the words that I choose, which may not be entirely precise, but they do make a contribution to the town in a fixed amount. I believe it's been between $27,000 and $35,000 over recent years. The Montauk Ferry also remits an amount to the town each year based on the traffic that they see, even though those are interstate
Yes.
travel. And then some, but not all, of the private marinas collect a landing fee on the town's behalf and remit that to us.
So does that mean that ferries coming from another state are not required to collect the landing and remit the landing fee?
That's my understanding.
that's their position.
But I mean,
But
I would just add that, for me, in my opinion, I think we would do well to retain someone who explain all of that to us, Because the example that comes to mind is Key West decided and voted that they weren't going to permit cruise ships anymore to come into their harbor. Now, that's clearly an interstate commerce fact, it seems to me. So I think there's probably more to the law, certainly more to the case law in this area than we might acknowledge. That doesn't mean that we have carte blanche, but I do think that periodically getting a sense from someone with some interstate commerce clause / PUC specific expertise would be worthwhile.
And I think there's probably a lot more case law now than there was when this was. put
Yeah,
in.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, so for instance, like when the new London ferry added a ferry from Orient Point last year, did you know that was happening prior to its happening or?
No, someone advised me who spent a lot of time down at the chamber office.
And I found out at a cocktail party from someone who said they came over on the Orient
Yes,
Point
maybe that's
ferry.
what I found out. Someone told me they came on the Orient Point ferry. So there is no Orient Point ferry. So,
So they told me.
right.
Yes,
so just
right.
If everyone in charge is unaware, what's the process for changing that? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I
Exactly.
think we're talking two different things here, the landing fee and how other places have been able to be successful is one thing. And I mean, the problem has always been, the issue has always been that we don't own the dock.
Mhm.
It's, international waters.
Yeah.
Was part of the.
Well, what is an international waters between here and the mainland? I've never understood that.
Again,
Okay.
I'll be the first to admit my limitation and expertise. But I'd be happy to talk with our solicitors and see
Yeah.
if they,
Yeah.
either ones, or if they know of someone and it may be worth.
Yes.
the,
It's just,
the
it'd be
compensation
worth
to
a,
get-
yes.
Have that.
I
because
think
We
so.
seem to have this discussion every single.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the reason I'm asking about the landing fees in general is that fee seems low, and then if you back out those other people, that would say Interstate's saying they only have 200,000 people coming in a year, which do you follow my math? So if you're saying what, 2022, 185,000 was collected in commercial landing fees. But that includes a payment from New London, a payment from Viking. I guess that's it, right? Or other fees, that would take that down. And then if the landing fee's 50 cents, I don't even know.
It's 15%. They,
15.
50 cents, but they maintain, I think it's 15% for the administrative piece of collecting the fees.
No,
Okay.
no, it's a cent, it's not a percentage.
I'm looking at this one agreement, so the screen may be different.
Because maybe,
Well, still, but
Maybe
if
it's-
you do simple math and you just,
Yes.
so take the 185 down to, let's say, 150. And then you say 50 cents, that's saying only 300,000 people came through interstate, which I don't think can be accurate.
Well, here would be my other question, right? Like,
And then so. Go ahead, sorry.
Well,
So
I
there
was just gonna say,
seems like a
you-
revenue opportunity.
you and
there.
I both collect and remit taxes for our businesses. I don't get to keep a percentage of that. I don't know if you do, but, nope, I don't get to keep a percentage of the sales tax. So if this is a fee that is supposed to be being turned over, why have we made an agreement that allows part of it to fall away?
Well, it's, if you think about it, they're justifying it, like if you use a vendor to collect parking tickets, that company keeps a percentage because they have to have someone who does maintaining the software and, blah, blah, blah. So,
but I think more to the point is the landing fee that's always been the same amount of money
right,
adequate? And at the time this was done, I don't think they were even using software. It's been in place for a long time. I think it's a lot easier now just to do it. And I think every ticket has this on it.
Well,
The numbers, I'm more concerned about the total number, the amount that we're charging. And with the changes that have happened since this was first put in, I wouldn't even go with the numbers of vehicles, the size of vehicles, that kind of impact, but you know, you have to have some kind of real numbers.
Well, the reason I also brought it up was I got a ticket and I happened to look at it, I mean, a receipt, and it charged me $1 for the landing fee.
Narragansett. Narragansett has a landing fee as well.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But I bought a one-way ticket. So why would I be charged?
You bought a
You still
one-way
landed
ticket from
in
here to Narragansett?
I bought a one-way ticket from Narragansett to Block Island and I was charged $1. So
don't-
shouldn't I have been charged 50 cents?
Yes, I think so.
I'm not positive.
I
I mean,
don't,
now we're getting to, I mean,
Yeah.
but it does go back to having clarity what our rights are to see is there an opportunity for more revenue in the landing fee
Yes.
area.
So if the other ferry gives us a donation, could we be bold enough to say what we'd like that donation to be? Perhaps that donation could match the ascending cost of cleaning the bathrooms in Old Harbor.
Marianne, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. Or-
You like that catch, huh?
I mean, my reaction is we run the risk of zero
Exactly,
Like, we
if they're
look
doing it
like-
voluntarily.
for.
And sometimes what we do is we
I mean, I
will,
get where you're going, but you could ultimately piss them off and be like, I don't feel I'm obligated to give it. And
Here's the thing, right? Like if you look at that tourism report about the hidden costs of tourism,
Yeah.
right? Everyone who takes that ferry over pees in our bathroom, drops their garbage in our waste baskets. Quite a few of them make use of our police services. You know, we have costs that we incur when they land here.
And isn't that, Amy, don't you do something every year on the breakdown of the costs?
We do, in June of every year, when the council authorizes that interfund transfer, we do identify some of the applicable line items, and Molly's given a highlight of what those are, across the board: restrooms, trash, dispatch, police.
And actually, like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm picking, I feel like I feel like Interstate, just to give them their due, they do take the brunt of the blame for ferry. We always seem to be like, well, Interstate, and sort of negating that there's all these other ferries coming, right? Whereas that New London ferry is dumping an awful lot of people off there to the left or to the right, you know, so, you know, they're a factor in this, and to at least, I don't want to sound like I'm anti-interstate, I'm not, right? And at least they are collecting and remitting this, and now like the other ferry company is giving us a donation, so kind. And, so maybe some equality between ferry companies.
it definitely bears upcoming agenda item, both frankly, I wish interstate weren't called interstate, but
Yes.
Yeah.
the interstate commerce questions and regulatory questions, as well as the landing fee question.
so I have the general law here. So just in the first sentence, town of New Shore is hereby authorized to charge, assess, or otherwise collect a 50-cent landing fee for each passenger over the age of 12. Arriving by public or private road. All fees collected, less expenses of collection shall be utilized by the town to promote health and safety. So the statute does say it allows them to charge the administrative fee of the collection. The town may enter into various town insurance and any operative agreement and so forth. So it talks about the town may enter into.
Yeah, I think the amount is in a side agreement with the PUC.
It's Pursuant to an agreement that we have with Interstate
Yeah,
that
Yes.
that I
but
can remember
PUC,
ratifying
under
a
PUC,
couple of
it's
years.
under a PUC line, I think.
Okay, Amy, please.
State aid. So page 6, most of the items under state aid are drawn from the governor's proposed budget, which means two things. They are subject to final approval of that budget. And for the items that are variable, so in this case, hotel, cottage tax, meals tax, airport aid, those are forecasted based on the governor's budget. In this case, for fiscal year 25, it's probably the best estimate that we can use. In some years, we do choose our own estimates based on the track records that we have. But at this point, I would stick with what the state has put forward, which is an increase in the meals tax and a reduction in the hotel tax that basically offset each other. And that's consistent with what we're seeing year to date in 24.
Okay.
So any questions on state aid
I mean, I have a lot of questions about state
that
aid.
I can actually
I don't even know whether you
clarify?
can use the word aid. But
You know, and that's always a funny thing with this page for me is some of these are direct aid and some of them are pass-throughs of
yeah,
taxes that our businesses
that,
collect and
I almost, yeah, anyway.
remit back. So the last page there is reserves and transfers in, and just a reminder of what these 3 items are. The first is a transfer from the land trust to offset the debt service expense that is reflected on our books. So you'll see a direct expense on the last page, debt service for $332,779. That comes in and goes out on their behalf. The second line, debt service reserve fund related to Island Light and Power. So many of you remember that we issued a 10-year bond related to the acquisition of the shares of the power company when the assets of the power company were sold to the utility district and those dollars were returned to the town. We set up a debt service reserve fund and agreed that those proceeds would be allocated over the remaining life of the bond. So we have $79,977 to offset the debt service that we pay against that note. The third item is a transfer from, in this case, the infrastructure and ARPA fund, which is $150,000 that the council authorized for the generator at the medical center. Again, just moving from one fund of the town so that we can pay for that expense here in the general fund budget.
Thank you.
And that actually does take us through the entirety of the budget over the last,
Yes.
3 times that we.
Thank you. Great job as always.
Question, I don't know if it's off the top of your head, so what is left in the ARPA fund? We've done some things in that, but not just the.
No, we've just
No,
done one.
just
So there's $153,000 remaining that needs to be committed by the town by the end of this calendar year. So not spent, but yep, committed by the end of 24 and spent by the end of 26.
Terrific.
So will we have a agenda item in the future to address that? We need to, that'll be, we'll all have our pet projects or someone will have a pet project. We're gonna, I'm sure there'll be lots of debate on how to use that.
Sure.
And you said must be expent by the end of 26.
I did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Committed by the end of this year and expended by 26.
It's the way the capital budget.
Go ahead, Amy.
So next on our agenda is the capital plan, which is the 6-year capital plan. We did go through the capital tax page in the budget, which reflects some reductions of the 25. And then it's really just a chance for the council to preview the outer years to see what else is coming down the pike. This has gone through the planning board and has their endorsement as well. I don't know if the council had a chance to look at it and wants to do questions or if we want to go line by line.
Anybody have a preference? I'd like to go through it all because theoretically someone's going to be watching and you're welcome.
So we'll just go top to bottom. And we start with that generator replacement at Health Services, which is planned for 2025. So that one's actually fairly easy and straightforward. The next is the Coast Guard Station interior work, and this involves basic shoring up essentially of that building, keeping it functioning in its current use. $150,000 planned for 2025.
Can I just interject?
Yep.
Marianne, I think if I was fortunate enough, I guess, to do a walkthrough of the Coast Guard facility a couple of years ago. I think it would be worth scheduling another one. Maybe with
Maybe
Phil,
when Mother Nature cooperates.
when Mother Nature cooperates, because it's really important
Before the
for
kids
people.
go out.
It's very important for people to see. It's very important for people to see.
Can we just back up to the first one? So the medical center generator, how did that not fall under the new project?
I'm gonna turn that to Mary Ann.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I couldn't hear you. All I heard was medical
Well, the
center.
generator, so we replaced it probably for the needs of the larger building. I'm just wondering why the funds that they raised didn't purchase that generator.
That was a discussion we had last year during the budget cycle that the medical center board has requested that we pay this through our capital. The building that is our facility. It's our property. So that's why it was done like that. And it was done, as Amy said, it was the ARPA money that paid for that.
Sorry to interrupt, Amy.
No, that's fine. That's why we're here. So the second part of that Coast Guard Station line, 1.5 million in 2026. Again, this is not some major change in use. This is still just talking about basic securing of the facilities on that property. And so I think a walkthrough will be instructive as we talk about that next year again. Moving down to the library building interior work. In 2025, we reduced that down from 60,000 to 30,000 and continue that 30,000 going out. This year, 2025 wraps up HVAC work. There's some additional considerations around basically climate, humidity, managing the interior environment. And then it continues with, again, pretty basic building needs, which may be painting, carpeting, rearranging areas. But at this point, we're keeping capital needs for the library on an annual basis as one of the most highly trafficked areas. Dispatch center renovations, again, we've talked about a few times, the need to better secure in an immediate way that space for the dispatchers and reconfigure that a little bit as a stopgap to a future public safety facility.
So I've been getting a lot of questions about this line over the last couple of days from people. Where did this $100,000 number come from? Is something people were asking. Are there specific plans? Is this a guesstimate or an estimate? Is it? The other question was, why would we sink $100,000 into a building that we're talking about tearing down? So just throwing them out
So
there.
Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, this was a request that came in from the police chief, the facilities director and the DPW director collectively,
Individually and collectively.
individually, so they individually and collectively. And I have to agree with them as it relates to that particular area of that facility. That's one of, when I first went to the police station, that raised a flag for me. The lack of what I would call police security in that area I think needs to be addressed. And so granted, we don't know what we're doing with it. They're built in down the road, but I think it's time that, especially when you have 3 collective bodies, department heads coming forward with.
Right, so my questions really don't have anything to do about whether we should do it, because personally, I would say, of course, we should have done it years ago when our dispatcher was threatened with a gun. It's glass windows there every year, and I know it's been discussed and we've always never had the money for this. But what I'm asking is, where did the sum of 100,000 come from? Is it an estimate based on a plan, or is it a guesstimate based on like
So Amy, you, the three
whatever?
of them
Yep.
individually and collectively talked to you. What did they provide you any detail?
I would characterize it as an estimate. A little bit more than hands in the air, and evolves out of that sort of need that's been discussed. So it was more carefully refined, I would say 2.5 to 3 years ago when it resurfaced most recently. And that's the number we were talking about then. When asked about whether that was still the right number, meaning, do we need more? The response to, do we need more, was really, well, we don't want to put too much in because it's really meant to be a stopgap to a more permanent facility. But that's probably what we're going to need to get the bare minimum done in terms of really reinforcing those public facing areas and creating a safer space. So I would characterize that as an estimate rather than a project budget. That's fair.
Okay, so then that's the other question that I was asked. I'm sorry, but the other question I was asked is the plan to sink $100,000 into a building that we're talking about tearing down?
If we're going to tear that down in the future, I would say yes. To answer that question, yes.
Okay,
I think I would contextualize that a little bit more by saying, I think the estimate for when the dispatch center would actually be ready to occupy a new facility is fairly far down the road. And so I think we'll get a fair amount of use out of work that we do now, as opposed to continuing to wait for that to be ready. Which feels like we're just pushing off something that we already know we should have dealt with a long time ago.
Right.
And I thought the plans were a little less concrete than they were a year ago on what was going to be done over there.
The plans.
If everything was going to be torn down, parts of it were going to be taken down.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has a clear expectation for what happens to the existing facility once a new public safety facility is ready. I think that's part 2, is what happens to the existing building.
so just to ask one more question that is my question, but the previous police chief talked about relocating the dispatchers across the hallway so that they would have no outward facing windows to protect them a little better from the street. Is that part of this plan, or are we just reinforcing what exists?
As I understand it, that's not part of the plan. It's more security glass and relocating them back a little way and securing the area as you walk in.
Beaches?
Beaches, again, we've talked about this one, which is the $60,000 grant match for the current pending DEM application at Gracie's Cove, which is both public access in terms of a walkway and erosion prevention in terms of controlling water and making sure we're not making that situation worse. That DEM application is still pending. So I think as soon as we know something,
So is this the total cost or is this just the match?
this is just the match. The
It seems like
next,
an awful lot of money.
For what, Grace's Cove?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I was gonna react to, even though I love it down there. What did the,
you're gonna ask me what Andy's Way
yeah,
cost.
wait a minute.
And I don't have that off the top of my head. I will get it.
Okay.
But it was more expensive than we thought it would be by a fair amount.
Okay.
So I would characterize this as comparable, which feels expensive.
Gracie's Cove too, there seems to be a little drainage situation there that's backing up, which is exacerbating the situation.
Yes.
And so it's not just the cost of the walkway, but the earth moving in order to facilitate all of that.
Go ahead, Amy.
So moving down, North Light improvements at $200,000. This is a continuation of a project. Again, the council has seen for a few years now and includes estimates from Abcor. I'm not going to have all the detail in front of me. I'll see if I can get it. But estimates from Abcor on the remaining work that they need to be doing, as well as some incidental, I would say, work around the building, like the generator, the solar panels. So things in it above and beyond just the physical structure. The representation is that this would complete the outside and securing of that building. But you know, until they actually get started, I'm not sure I'm going to sign on to that entirely.
Sure.
So can I ask, so in the budget, we have $15,000 for maintenance at the North Light, which would be totally different from, this is for exterior, right? And then the budget is,
So that's going to be things like fuel for the generator. Trying to think of other expenses to just keep the building
Those are operating. This is
Right.
operating,
and then,
figuratively to keep the lights on.
and then we have $20,000 for wages, because that hasn't been open for a few years, right?
It has not. And that, you know, that's something we toyed with in this budget. Whether or not they were going to be open for this summer, they did submit their request and sort of reiterated that they had hoped to be. I did take a little bit off of their request. You can see it's not fully funded, but that was their representation.
So the plan is to have it open this summer. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Do we have a vast number of how many guests have visited particular
Marion, I don't know if
site?
you have that.
We can check. I'm not sure. I know it hasn't been open since COVID. So it's been a while since it's been.
Alright.
And I'm not sure about the guest numbers prior to that.
A surprising number. To me at least.
Okay.
And then didn't we also have a vehicle in the budget for the North Light?
It's not exclusively for the North Light, but it would be used to access the North Light, yes. It's shared across the North Light and highways and building. So I don't have the history on this page, but the offsetting budget amount, which again is based on that history, when we did collect revenue, was $9,500 of visitor fees.
I don't remember what we charged.
I mean, it's for companies that we're on this, but you, I mean, we're charging people to go in the building because renting or would you not be able to?
Museum on the first floor, and we sold water out there.
There's
No one's going out there now. It's because it's not open. But part of, for me, the promise of this is you commit this 200. We've been in conversations with Ørsted about making a major investment there. And you turn it into a destination that it hasn't been for a while. It's, by the way, I'm talking about the Coast Guard station, but it also, if you get a chance, it's worth going out there with Robbie or someone to the North Light and going inside. It's,
Just the basement.
yeah, it's really worth it. Because it's both on the one hand, it's disturbing how much it needs. On the other hand, it's an extraordinary building. It really is an under-visited, underutilized. And there's all kinds of things you can see doing out there. Right, Amy, we're on comprehensive plan.
Down to the comprehensive plan, which is due for its 10-year update. $60,000 in 2026 in order to accomplish that. I do have some concerns as we get closer to next budget year about whether that's enough. That's about what we spent 10 years ago.
Yes,
So we're gonna have to, hopefully we'll have bids back by the time we put next year's budget together.
yes.
That would be my goal.
So next, is this calendar year or fiscal year? So
This
this,
is fiscal year.
no, I mean, the comprehensive plan, does that run? When, for example, would we be making appointments to a comprehensive plan group? Or start spending money on it, I guess? Is that a January 1st?
I'm going to go on the limb here and say it's more of a, probably a fiscal year.
Okay,
And we may do some preliminary work by,
right, gotcha.
and I think it's dependent on the situation.
So the next section brings us down to requests from fire and rescue. They did submit a pretty detailed set of requests if anyone would prefer to read those. But we're looking at the first line there are your engines, tankers, and ladders. A replacement in 26 and 27, and then some modifications in 28. The current 2 rescue vehicles, I think you all remember, were secured through a grant. So then we're looking at replacements for those in 28 and 29. Equipment, the first 2 years there, 350 and 350, that's years 1 and 2 of the saltwater pump. Again, we've spread that over 2 years. And then as a placeholder here, we have the public safety complex with a placeholder number of 15 million. Obviously, that's pending a few other elements, hopefully to offset.
So can I ask, I've been asked the same questions about the saltwater pump. Like if that's based on an estimate for a specific pump, or if that is like a guess at how much a pump might cost.
My recollection is that pump, that is the amount that the manufacturer quoted. It's a $700,000 pump.
And is that, does anyone know if that's a portable pump or will it be fixed in Old Harbor?
No, it's portable.
Portable, so it
It's
can go to
on
Old
a
Harbor.
trailer. There was a really cool, and I think there might be some videos floating around. I can try to find them. It was in last fall when that was here. One day, the manufacturer was out, their manufacturer's rep was out and actually did a demonstration with it. And it hooks onto the back of like an F-250, if I recall correctly. It was astounding, honestly.
And then the other question that I was asked was, what would be the advantage to this pump over having a fireboat? Which I doubt there's anybody in here who can answer that question, but I was asked that question. I'm going to ask it. So
I don't think a fireboat would have helped with a harborside fire. Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
I'm not, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know.
I don't know. I was asked this question. I'm gonna put it forward.
I think they're very different species and solve different problems.
My issue on this, I know, is, I'm gonna give a voice to this, I think, I really would like to see whether there's a way that we can just buy this fiscal year, because I do worry that, you know, there's this sort of, my own anxiety is, oh darn, we had half the money set aside for that and we need it. So anyway, I just say that. I don't have any brilliant ideas about how to move it around, but.
So in the next section, we start to talk about vehicles and equipment. Molly, you mentioned trucks. That's down in that interdepartmental line. That's actually 2 vehicles in that $80,000. And then another 30,000 in additional equipment for the highways vehicles. That's generally going to be your plows and your front equipment.
So if we're getting 2 pickup trucks for 80 grand, could I get in on that deal?
Believe me, I questioned that number. These are small.
David, anybody else?
Yeah, these are very small light duty vehicles.
Yes.
So,
I'm sorry to be flippant.
well, no, that's what I said. Is this one or is this two?
Have there been any more discussions with DOT about something transportation wise out here?
There's something in the agreement about transportation, about vehicles that we purchase, and that's in the agreement.
No, additional. Transfer, you guys met last year. They didn't have the budget for, call it a trolley, bus.
So
I know that
I'm
wouldn't
just
be
trying
for
to,
us to budget, but it's with in
Oh,
discussion
about-
of vehicles for the town.
about, for example, purchasing a trolley. Is that what you're, is that
Not
what you mean?
purchasing a trolley, DOT doing something for us on the island.
Oh, RIPTA.
Oh, RIPTA.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes, yes,
sorry,
yes,
sorry.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
They're,
Yes, but they are 16 passenger, 14, no, 15 passenger,
talk about it
All right.
offline.
14 passenger plus 1 driver.
So just related to that, since I'm sorry, now I'm taking us further off topic, but have we decided what department those 2 vans are going to lay in? Like, so we're getting 2 vans from RIPTA. Will they be part of the recreation department? Will they be, where are those going?
So how I see the vans being envisioned and being used is we provide one to the school. Because it could be very beneficial if the school wants it.
If they need a 4th bus at the
If-
school?
No,
Just my own input there.
Well, is that vehicle going to be on the mainland?
that's going to be on the mainland for the school. It'll be on-
Okay,
And I don't want to speak for Bob, but it'll be on the mainland. And the other one will be designated for town departments, no one specific department. Like we're doing, what we're seeing here is that we're going to be sharing the vehicle based on need. It could be used by the human service department, could be used by recreation. There's a number of departments that can be used. Maybe we'll keep one of the old van we have also on the mainland, because keep in mind, the recreation director does go on the mainland a lot for the weekends with the kids, especially on Saturdays for the basketball and different sports that the kids play, the recreation age kids. And then we may keep the other one here. I think once we get them here and we start using them, I think they'll be used a lot and we can bet out what's.
my concern isn't that they're not going to be useful. My concern is that when, who's cleaning that? Who's making sure that it, that, maintenance issues get addressed, right? Like if that belongs to the recreation department, then the recreation director is in charge of that vehicle and will make sure that the bubble gum stuck to the seat gets taken off and that it gets reported if the tire is low on air and has a slow leak. Do you see what I'm like? Whereas if it's nobody's problem, it's everybody's problem.
You're talking about a van remaining?
Well,
Any
whatever it
van,
is.
any van that doesn't specifically belong to anybody.
So I think
I don't know.
we'll have that discussion with department heads and they'll, if it's being used by 2 departments, I'm sure they can work out and be sure that it's cleaned and the bubble gum is taken off. I mean, one of the things that they've done in other places is they have a log. Who uses it when they used it, new person comes in, sign in, said it was clean and things.
There isn't one on the main line now.
It is, at times it is on the mainland, yes.
Because years ago, we had one on the main line all the
Yeah,
time.
we have one. What happened was we had to buy one secondhand because the van we had, I think no longer has the inspection. These vans weren't coming for a period of time. So we did end up and was budgeted that we bought a used van. That's what
Right.
we use.
The town council did it too. One time.
ready to move on?
Yes.
First line item there is discussing the expansion of the Old Harbor West Dock. Preliminarily slated for 2026, although, again, I think that may be pushed out a little bit further. This is really about, expanding the gap between the current dock and the Red Water, just to increase capacity there. It's something, again, that's been sort of talked about informally for years. I wouldn't be surprised if putting it down a little bit as we got through next year's funding cycle. Because the bigger emphasis right now, both from the public works and public master, is on the bulkhead, which is the third line down. And this is the concept of reinforcing Old Harbor Dock in order to allow barges or other vessels to land in a way that's more conducive to offloading. Many of you have probably seen them reach over the dock, but actually reinforcing it so that it's coming back right up to it. So we've got $25,000 to $2,000 for engineering and preliminary permitting with the hope that construction can be done in 2026. The last line there is related to the visitor center. Again, a little bit in flux in terms of what's happening there and what the timetable will be. If you think back to the 2025 budget, we've actually reduced that 75,000 to 35, and now we furnishing fixtures, lockers, and outfitting of that facility.
Can I ask, the bulkhead, so right now the airport project is using that space, right, to offload materials? Do they pay the town a fee for that?
Amy, is your mic on?
No, it wasn't. Sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
I will double check on that. I believe they should be. I can't think of a reason why they would not. And I would say that it was always anticipated that when we did a project like this, we would make those fees a bit more robust. So yes, and let's do more if we're able to reinforce the dock in a way that allows more traffic and volume. So, but I'll check on that. Moving down to harbors, vessels and equipment, the one line item there is related to the Marine Patrol. This is anticipated to be a match when we eventually replace that vessel. We've done a significant amount of work this spring, which again, hopefully will slide out that match whenever the time comes. So far, we've been able to keep it rolling along, which is always a good thing. Because when that time does come to fully replace it, again, I think we're going to have to escalate that 125 up even with a grant match. Because that's typically going to be a 25% contribution. Information technology, we have some planned replacement outlined here, although in many cases, particularly with the library, we're able to secure grant funding for these. And so by the time we get to needing to replace library technology, the library has secured grants. Police compliance technology, again, we've done a lot of funding in recent years that we're still spending and investing in. And so the replacement factor of those is a little bit up in the air at the moment. We just want to make sure that we're maintaining what we have as we're deploying it. So these are sort of placeholders in the technology side right now.
Can I just ask a question? And Marianne, I don't know if you know the answer. Paul might know. My understanding was we invested in a bunch of stuff for the police cars and it never fully got implemented. Did that finally take place?
I don't think it has, and I'm not sure if the equipment is, I think the equipment may be too old. I'm not sure, but no, it has not been. It has not been in, they didn't put it in yet.
Okay.
It was purchased under the Matt Marine, Matt money.
Okay.
Was that computers or what was that?
It was devices for the police vehicles. The mobile device, they're like, you know how you see the little
Yes.
laptops in the police vehicles, that's what it was.
And we did order them or we did not order them?
We did order them, Matt Monahan ordered, and they never got installed.
So they're at the police
They're at
station? And is having that kind of connectivity part of our,
That was part of it,
part of our,
broadband.
no,
Communications?
no, what's it called when you get the imprimatur of a,
Accreditation.
accreditation? Thank you. I
I'm sure
feel
it's a
like it was
requirement
sold
that-
to us on that basis for what it's
Yeah,
worth.
it's
Well,
definitely part of the accreditation, but also it's very helpful for a police officer when they pull up behind a vehicle.
Yeah, I
to-
mean,
yeah, plug
I'm
it
not
in.
disputing how
Yeah.
helpful it is. I'm just curious about, I mean, is this something the new communications person would do? Is it, you know, because I mean, I'm sure we all share frustration that this is equipment that was purchased and is sitting in a closet somewhere.
And it-
Um,
Is it going to be
Let me
installed?
double check with
That's-
Paul Dean. I know he came up to me and told me that he had found equipment, so I can check with him and find out what his intentions are.
So when I was on the police advisory, Chief Moynihan sort of expressed surprise that our cars were so antiquated. And he was like, this isn't even just standard elsewhere. It's like been standard for 15 years.
Yeah.
So that I think is what his goal was, to get us up to like the very least that we should be doing.
Yeah.
Because right now what they do is if they pull someone over, they have to call dispatch.
yes,
So now you're completely taking up dispatch to look up something that you could look up yourself if you had the equipment in the car. So
and
that's
it,
what we're talking about, right?
and by human nature, it seems to me, you're less likely to ticket if you have to go through a back and forth, as opposed to having a computer in your police vehicle that issues ticket, you know, that helps
Yes.
you to issue tickets.
And if
Would-
they go on that computer and they see the person they pulled over,
Yeah,
the license plates have a warrant for an arrest.
Yeah.
They may
Is-
pull it back.
Is this something that we could have you close the loop on? Could you?
Yeah, that's what I just
Please.
said. I'll follow up with Paul
Okay.
Dean.
great.
In a similar vein, the next line down is body worn camera program. And so that is not shown as zeros because the program's not happening. It's entirely funded at this point through, as far forward as we can see, through the grant program. So at this point, between the dollars the town has already committed and the program, we have enough funding for, I think it was at least 5 years. So that is on its way through deployment process.
Yeah, those will be definitely deployed before the summer.
Terrific. Thank you.
Moving down to Public Works and Highways, this is where we start to get into the DOT conversations. We were anticipating the start of the highways garage facility in 2025 with the apartments in 2027. Obviously, there's some additional information needed there in terms of timing. Moving down to solid waste and the transfer station facility, we've talked about the 150 planning dollars in 2025. There's funding slated for 2026 that's very much dependent on the results of that exercise in terms of planning, engineering, and needs assessment. So that $2 million is again meant as a placeholder for the outcomes of that study. Anything you would add to that, Mary Ann? Nope.
Not at this point, no.
Recreation, parks and open space, resurfacing in 2026 is pretty straightforward. And then pickleball court match in 25. Again, we've talked about, this is also pending a DEM grant, and we've already secured $5,000 in Lions grant.
So 15 is what the town needs to kick
50 is
in?
the remaining for the town. So 20,000 total was our match. The Lions have kicked in 5. So. I won't spend too much time on the school. I think that stands by itself. So moving down to transportation, Horn Neck Road Resiliency 465. This is part of the grant program that's already underway. And again, as we look at the outcomes of that exercise, a placeholder in 2028, 6.25. That 625 comes from the prior study of Horn Neck Road. So we expect that to change and evolve both in terms of scope and cost and program with the study that we're doing now. So that will be refined. The next item, Chapel Street sidewalk out in 27 and 28, and the one below it, Horn Neck Road sidewalk.
Sorry, can I just ask you on that?
Yeah.
That 6.2?
Yep.
What do you, I mean, it's huge, obviously. So mostly funded by the state, or what do we anticipate? I know it's a ways out, but I'm just curious.
Or the feds.
For the federal?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a state road, I believe. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we're not doing anything independently there.
The value of these out years is it's calling out investments that are going to need to occur, you know? I don't think it's as much for,
And that's really the point of those two sidewalk projects. We're not going to tackle those on Chapel Street and Horn Neck. And whether or not the state actually tackles them is yet to be seen, but they were part of the TIPS program and slated for funding for Block Island. And so if they're not going to do those, maybe we can leverage them to do something else, but it's keeping that visibility on the projects they did commit to. You know, same thing, Mary Ann's working on the funding for the state roads out here. And then we had anticipated matching $1 million this year, and then in 2028, that allows us, when we do ask a warrant question for borrowing related to road improvements, we do it in $1 million increments usually, and that allows us to piggyback on any kind of paving project that might be happening. So that if somebody is bringing asphalt out and the public works director knows that this area, and this area are a priority, and it's $200,000 to get that done, we take the opportunity to piggyback on another project. There is also a grant match out there related to town roads that I believe will exhaust our existing sort of pot of money related to town roads. So this would be sort of refunding that amount. So. And again, that becomes a borrowing question, the $1 million, so a warrant question. Questions?
any questions for Amy? Thank you as always, Amy. All right, I would ask for a motion to open our first budget public hearing, please. Second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. First budget public hearing is now open. Anybody from the audience like to speak today? No? Come on, Judy.
Turn this on. Judith Gray, Sands Pond Road, and Chair of the Block Island Sea Level Rise Committee. Always appealing to you guys to please keep us in the loop. So on the comprehensive plan, we're probably should be littered. The word sea level rise should be littered all through it. And so we're happy to help you with that. The two vans, the RIPTA vans, we have been borrowing the Nature Conservancy van when we have school groups come out, or when I school groups, I mean like researchers from University of Rhode Island. And so it'd be wonderful to have a facility like that. And in the meantime, the TNC has been wonderful in letting us share in that expense. And I'm very excited to see the Horn Neck Road construction in the out budgets. And I very happy to work since it's a construction number. If we depending on where we go and who we go to for budget money for this, especially from the feds. The Department of Transportation, I think, is going to be such an important partner for us in going forward with this. And I just want to, I want to also invite myself and our representatives to those meetings for sea level rise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Anybody else? I have a motion to, do you want to continue or close? Okay, great. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing? Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Public hearing is closed. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Seconded by Martha. All those in favor indicate by saying aye, aye. Opposed, no, we're adjourned.
Yep.
We're done.
No,